Hey everyone, and welcome back to Flutter From Scratch. In this 4-part episode, we'll have a look at how we can install development tools, install plugins, configure our emulators, and then we'll test hot reload. So let's make a start by looking at how we can install our development tools. To get started, head to flutter.dev and click on the Get Started button. Then we can choose our platform we're using, before finally downloading the zip file. At the same time, we're going to download Android Studio to use as our IDE for Flutter. We can do this at the same time that we're downloading the Flutter zip file. Just accept the terms and then download Android Studio. A few minutes later, and Flutter should hopefully finish downloading. The next thing we need to do is just extract that zip file to somewhere we can get to it later on. In my case, I just extract it to C drive Flutter. At about the same time, Android Studio finishes downloading, so I go ahead and start the setup for that as well. When setting up Android Studio, it's important to tick the Android Virtual Device box. That's just so you can test your app on your local computer without having to use a physical device. You can opt into Analytics if you want to, before you're finally faced with the Android Studio setup wizard. We'll just accept the standard settings for the install type on this screen. The reason for this is quite simple. As part of the standard setup, we get everything we need installed by default. So now if we go ahead and click on Finish, all these required components will be downloaded to our workstation. So now we're at the Android Studio welcome screen, and it's time to install our plugins. In Android Studio, this is something that's pretty easy to do. So we'll click on Configure, and then we'll click on Plugins. We'll need to get the Flutter plugin for Android Studio. Installing this package will also install dependent packages like Dart Language Support. Next up, we'll install the Flutter Block Support package for Android Studio. When we do this, we'll have to be careful to install the right Flutter block package into Android Studio, so we can choose the block code generator. The correct package will mention the vendor as just block, and it'll also mention Equatable in the description, which is a package that Flutter block depends on. So we just install that package and restart Android Studio when prompted. After it restarts, you should now have an option to start a new Flutter project. But we won't do it just yet. Instead, we'll go ahead and configure Flutter on our local machine first. Previously, we extracted that Flutter zip file to C drive Flutter. So in here, we want to locate the bin folder. This Flutter batch file is what we're after. So the next thing we need to do is just add it to our system's path. That's as simple as clicking on the start icon, typing in path, choosing the Edit the System Environment Variables option, click on the Environment Variables button, and then just double click on the path option in the top list. From here, it's just as simple as clicking on the new button and then copy and pasting in that path that we had before. Now we just open a command prompt, and we should be able to run the Flutter command. Now would be a great time to run Flutter Doctor to make sure our environment is set up correctly. And we get our first taste of how supportive Flutter can be to the developer, with it spotting an issue and then telling us what we can do to fix that issue. Because this machine is completely pristine, I just need to accept the Android licenses. So now we've done that, let's run Flutter Doctor again and see what it thinks now. As we can see, we're good to go. We're running the latest stable of Flutter, and also our Android toolchain is good to go because we just accepted those licenses. Flutter can also see that we have Android Studio installed. So now we're ready to start our new Flutter project in Android Studio. We'll go ahead and choose Flutter Application and click Next. We'll then go ahead and name our app, and we'll also tell Android Studio where we extracted that Flutter SDK to in the first place. If you remember, it's C drive Flutter. Android Studio tells us where it's going to put the project, and also lets us set a description, but we can change this later if we want to. Then we set our company domain. Through doing this, we will get a package name. In this case, azimuth.com becomes com.azimuth, and our package name becomes com.azimuth.sonder. Now it's time to configure Android emulators on our computer. We can do that by clicking on the little Android icon next to the mobile phone up the top right hand corner. Next, we want to create a virtual device to use for testing our Flutter apps. I just choose a Pixel 2 to test on, and then I choose an Android emulator image. I usually choose a fairly old version of Android to make sure that my app is compatible with older devices from the get-go. Then we select that version of Android and click Next. Then we should go into Advanced Settings and up the amount of storage we have available on our internal storage and our SD card a little bit. The reason why is because I've experienced where I run out of space on my virtual device. And now we should be able to hit finish to finalize the creation of our Android virtual device. Now for you, it's just as simple as pressing the play button next to that AVD. But for me, because I'm running this setup on a virtual machine, it won't actually work. That's okay, I'll show you the next steps on a physical device and you can follow along on your emulator. So I'll just go ahead and choose the device that I want to deploy this to. And then I'll go ahead and click the little green bug button to start the app in debug mode. Now you've probably seen the starting Flutter project about 1,000 times, but let's just see the power that we have immediately in hot reload. Simply change a property, in this case the color, and then save it, and it will immediately be updated on your device. Of course, this extends to almost anything. Even text can be updated on the fly, and the second you hit save, you'll get a stateful hot reload. After these hot reloads, our app still functions as we would expect, which is pretty cool. For me, the real power in this exists in not only being able to change the visual layer, but also being able to change the results of functions. In this case, I can make the counter value double whenever I press the button. In my experience, the amount of time that this has saved me, this feature alone, has been absolutely massive. The reason for this is simple. Normally, when you're making your phone app, you would build and deploy to a device. Then you would see that it needed a change, maybe a typo or something like that. After this, you'd just build your app again and deploy it again, before finally checking that it actually worked on the emulator or your device. With Flutter and Hot Reload, you only really have to do steps 2 and 4 out of this list, which can save you a lot of time. So that concludes how to install Flutter on your computer, but in our next episode, we'll have a look at how Flutter projects are structured. Thanks for joining me on the first episode of Flutter from Scratch. I hope to see you again at episode 2.